It's go time with Neptune in Aries from 2025 to 2039. Meet me in the fog of a red smoke grenade. When I say meet me, I mean me, meeting myself. Yourself. Fire sign Aries, as the first sign of the zodiac, proclaims me, me, me. Its motto, indeed its punchy modus operandi, is I am. Neptune is what we often think of as God, goddess, or at least our spiritual mystic connection to a higher self, space, or consciousness. Aries knows perfectly well, with the supreme confidence of a freshly minted arrival, that they are indeed goddesses or God's favourite. As a cardinal initiating sign, Aries embodies the confidence to be first, go first, head first, like the fool pictured in tarot, about to step off a cliff, setting off on a brave new adventure, blazing trails and doing it their way. Aries, the firebrand of sheroes and heroes, has had quite a run in recent history, having hosted Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Mars retrograde, and currently hosting Chiron, plus Venus retrograde and Mercury as I wrote this piece. All without interval or time for a pit stop and wheel alignment. In 2025, Neptune swaps out its siren song of fairy bells and millennial pinks for air raid sirens and the red of rage, much like Act 5 of an Aries saga. It pops in, it retrogrades out, and then it goes back in January 2026. So Neptune, let's walk further into the fog to explore. Its orbit is 165 years, and that means it's in each zodiac sign for 14 years. Its MO is to dissolve. Its function is dissolution in order to unite or merge. It's the principle of oneness, felt as divine connection, collective oneness, a unifying union like yoga or yoke, transcendence. Its function, it's a vehicle, doorways, paths to experiencing a higher state, a state altered from ordinary waking consciousness. Its form, what Neptune feels or looks like a fog, a mist. It's nebulous. It's sensed or experienced through a feeling. No traction, slippery, ethereal, psychic. Doors to the liminal space, transportive vehicles like high art, film, monasteries, ashrams, the ideals of the time, mind-altering practices and substances. It's good for, and this is the high road of Neptune, healthy, sustainable ways of experiencing direct spiritual experience or connection, inspired art, channeling the muse, an egoless state, selfless compassion and empathy, finely tuned awareness and sensitivity, psychic ability, a state of oneness and enlightenment, positive spiritual ideals, redemption. See Liz Green's book, The Astrological Neptune and the Quest for Redemption. It has such a great feeling of taking you in there. And of course, my book, Astro Power, by Vanessa Montgomery, which deep dives the planets. So look up Neptune in there. The pitfalls, and this is the low road of Neptune: confusion, foggy, unclear, lost, waking up in the gutter, escapism from harsh reality, addiction in its many forms, lack of boundaries, fantasy, illusion, delusion, madness, lost a grip on reality, ego unraveled, the victim martyr, cults, disappointment, gullibility, and deception. What's the antidote? AA, get the spirit in a healthy, sustainable way. So 10 boundaries, use Saturn. Ground through reality, ritual and routine, that's Virgoan. With Neptune in Aries, the balance point would be Libra. Ground through considering others, forming healthy social relationships to anchor yourself, being a good partner, a bestie or collaborator to help keep it real. Neptunian types are mystics, true spiritual leaders, not the false ones, obviously. That's the delusion and illusion. Healers, artists, psychics, visionaries, On the low road, we've got the addicts, the lost souls, the cult leader and the disciples, the martyr, victim, savior. Hijacked Neptune principle may look like leaders tapping into the natural need for belief, faith, and connection to a higher principle to validate themselves, their power, their decisions or actions, weaponizing God, etc., in a detrimental way to others for power, control, wealth, or position. War waged in the name of a higher force, a particular religious ideology, etc., positioning themselves as a conduit through which you must experience the higher power, like, the Crusades in history, Hitler, cult leaders, many leaders, even today. The last time Neptune was in Aries was 1861 to 1874. Remember, it has a really long cycle. So Neptune entered Aries with a bang. Literally, the gunpowder was lit, shots rang out, and the American Civil War was on, heralding the beginning of the last cycle. In the same year, Russia disbanded its feudal system with its Emancipation Manifesto, freeing the serfs as this planet of the collective swaggered through the independent sign of affirmative, direct, and, if need be, aggressive action. As the spirit of the times, each zodiacally flavoured Neptunian era leaves a distinct visual and social imprint we remember it by. As I write, we're rapping on Neptune playing to a hometown crowd in the sign it rules, which is watery Pisces. Seeing us out in popular culture is Pisces native Chapel Rowan, whose star has risen to dizzying heights. This era will surely be remembered for the unicorn emoji, fluidity, HSPs, highly sensitive people, and the mainstreaming of technologies assisting us to go within. Esoterica and creative pursuits like astrology, tarot, yoga, crystals, art, and craft have all had their moment. I call it a peak unicorn. So paint and sip classes seem to be the perfect expression. Of course, other planets had already set the seas to rumble, with Uranus and Chiron having previously moved through Pisces. Last time Neptune was in Pisces, the gold rush was on and borders gave way to immigrating Chinese prospectors. The Fox sisters enthralled and duped America with their April Fool's Day spirit hoax, kicking off a seance craze. Toward the end of this round, mediumship had once again become of interest. Tyler Henry, Neptune conjunct his sun in Capricorn, has his own successful show, Hollywood Medium. More recently, Neptune through Scorpio ushered in the sexual revolution. That was the 60s. Neptune in Sagittarius brought us exotic Eastern spirituality and disco. That was the 70s. Neptune in Capricorn was a certain greed was good. That was the 80s. By Neptune in Aquarius, we were heading into the digital information highway. As the millennium ticked over, the Y2K bug didn't crash our society or take out my student loan like I'd hoped. We all set up our social media accounts ready for digital addiction and mass connection. Let's take a look at the Aries archetype. So back to the sign of the moment. Consider the element of fire. Too much of a good thing. So too much fire. Fire can impel, energize, or become a destructive force. The devastating power of fire was in recent headlines as Los Angeles wildfires filled our feeds and devastated our dreams of Hollywood. Or is that just me? This was written at that time, and now that I'm recording this, we've just had fires devastate the state of Victoria that I'm in Australia. So too much fire can have impatience turn to anger, then rage, headaches, heat issues like rashes, inflammation, boils, and redness. If there's not enough fire element, fire is energy. Without it, we experience a lack of energy, drive, will, enthusiasm, confidence, lust for life, vitality, a lack of digestive fire, or even the will to live. Fire is hot, so not enough heat, and we get cold and wet or cold and dry. Aries rules the head, symbolized by the ram, and specifically the ram first or head first, think later approach, like the ram used to knock through a fortified castle gate or the blast of heat from a furnace door. The firepower of Aries packs an immediate punch. Aries is fearless, bold, brave, brassy, self-referencing, self-centered, competitive, and really does love to win. Aries is ruled by Mars, the deity of war. Mars is the principle of action, assertion, will, and self-defense. It's associated with sharp metal that cuts or pierces. This can flip over to violence, bloodlust, bloodshed, and belligerence. So, what might we expect this time around? The usual fighting, wars, spiritual warriors, sheroes, journeys, finding your edge, fire, pioneering, heat issues, battles, conflicts, and risk-taking. With the sign of the warrioress, hosting the planet of spiritual ideals, I expect the strong, gym-bodied Atlas type of physical, solo, or survival type of endurance experiences. And, of course, pushing the limits into space, science, and anywhere there is to break new ground. With Neptune sensitizing Aries, the spiritual or selfless warrior comes to mind. Who could benefit from more agency, self-determination, and free will? That's who we will fight for. I'll add here that we can see a lot of conflict in the world around us over the last year, and it's clearly still building. And we're seeing division through the ICE agents in America and the people starting to really snap back and protect each other and their communities. So what I wrote last year, Neptune informs the way we approach, access, and idealize our spiritual connection. Freezing ice baths are out, firewalking is in. Red, and more red, bright colours through fashion and design goes without saying. Personally, I'm looking forward to more superhero movies and hoping Xena Warrior Princess gets a remake. Yes, Gladiator 3 is already in the pipeline, and so is Supergirl, a Woman of Tomorrow. Aussie movie maker Baz Luhrmann is bringing us his spin on spiritual warrioress and visionary Joan of Arc. FYI, Xena was played by Lucy Lawless, who boasts Aries rising, Aries moon, Aries sun, Saturn, and North Node, while the original Gladiator was Aries sun and Mars Russell Crowe. Which Aries stars will rise over this period? If it comes to more war like last time, who will we fight the good fight to emancipate? Over Neptune in Pisces, the empathy builds. In Aries, we take selfless action for the selfhood and agency of others less fortunate. If each side sees themselves as both victim and avenger with God on side, we may have a problem. Religious wars, anyone? Theology is already mixing with politics. We tend to see a bit of alien sensation with Aquarius placements, so combining that with Aries, I think of the book and movies War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. He actually had Neptune in Aries and Moon in Aquarius, so there's that combo. It was released as a radio series by Orson Welles, strangely no relation, also Moon in Aquarius. Saturn in Aries transited his natal Venus and Mars in Aries. How will we express our fear of aliens, the unknown, invasion through the arts this time around? Is War of the Worlds up for yet another remake? Probably. Aside from renewing your gym membership and investing in a red muscle top, we could revere the saintly athlete as our Shiro, revive war or warrioress or warrior stories, Shiros and heroes, and invent more futuristic versions. Will camo and cargo pants finally make a comeback? I'd love to see self-defense classes go more mainstream, especially for women. We're already seeing people forming groups to get active outdoors in niche run clubs. There's that Pluto and Aquarius showing up, group activity. Last time in Australia, Burke and Wills were busy putting a new spin on losing themselves, which is very Neptunian. Not all who wander are lost, but they definitely were lost and dying on the most expensive, famous and disastrous expedition of all time. Of course, the leader, Burke, had a charismatic stellium in Aries, was completely unqualified and made a series of rash, impulsive decisions that serve as a cautionary tale to the failings of this sign, especially as the planet of becoming lost enters the fray. So check your natal chart and track Neptune through your natal house hosting its transit. Nuclear fusion, not fission, as a power source with fire at its core looks promising, so development will most likely continue. One to watch. The mutability of Pisces was clear in the fluidity of gender and identity, as well as attendant confusion from many sides. As Aries is a single-pointed cardinal sign, we could see the recent backlash next level. Aries is like a soldier who would keep going, bleeding, a far cry from the special needs and sensibilities of the last 14 years. I don't think it will be a particularly tender period in the way that we've seen. Drag performers were once known as gender illusionists. Over the Neptune in Pisces era, they found their place in the sun, with RuPaul's Drag Race gaining mainstream popularity and widespread influence. Will drag kings finally have their day as Aries calls the shots? Keep an eye on Aries. This is their time to shine. Neptune transits often coincide with fame, and I can't help but notice London's Tate Modern exhibition Lee Bowery, an exhibitionist Aussie Aries about London town. Bowery was full throttle outrageous, lived fast and died young. The exhibit opened late February 2025 as Venus in Aries prepared to retrograde, ushering in the Neptune in Aries era. Bowery stated that he designs everything for himself, of course he did, and had to scale down for costuming much smaller dancers. He also declared, "The fact that I am, you should be very grateful for." Sounds on brand for an Aries to me. Gender bias, Aries, Mars, and a rising tide. With girls and women breaking out of narrow social contracts, a backlash of misogyny, think Andrew Tate, may see ongoing conversation and consciousness raising around this topic. A rising tide of the macho ideal may be something to contend with, and hopefully a construct will dissolve over this era. The way we use gender in astrology reinforces and perpetuates gender stereotypes, which are at the heart of women's safety concerns, as well as ability to meet our potential and create balance in the world. Not to mention men being able to perceive women as Marsy, assertive, energetic leaders, athletic, etc., rather than masculine, and give themselves and other men a break from having to keep up the construct. Let's utilize astrology as a tool for empowerment and remember to represent the full spectrum of people expressing this energy, regardless of their gender. I suggest we describe what we mean rather than use gender as shorthand. I'll say that again. Describe what we mean rather than use gender as shorthand for behaviors and traits associated with planets and signs. Because representation is everything. Let's keep it diverse. Cofactors. Saturn is also in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius. I noticed about the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, as it is this time around, was the American Revolution, a war of independence, followed by the bloody French Revolution. The standout signature of the French Revolution was surely Madame Guillotine's reign of terror as royal heads rolled. Saturn was in Aries, and of course Aries rules the head. Aries' planetary ruler, Mars, is associated with sharp metal that cuts. Saturn is a planet symbolized as a grim reaper, the end of this mortal coil. At that time, Uranus was in Leo, representing royalty, and it was opposite Pluto in Aquarius. Aquarius represents power, or with Pluto, power as wielded by the people, also associated with death and rebirth and transformation. This time, Uranus is in a very healthy, happy relationship with Pluto as they move back into their ongoing sextile aspect, both in trine to Neptune and Saturn in Aries at the apex. I expect change to be more smooth, or at least without the loss of coiffed heads this time. Uranus will be in Gemini with Pluto occupying Aquarius, both air signs. So rather than royalty, all roads lead to information, technology, and I would think artificial intelligence. Our fantasy or idealized human, perhaps. I think of the many movies where an ideal, independent, artificial, or biointelligent being blows our minds, then having become its own version of sentient, fights for its right to life, often taking out a few humans on its path to independence. Mary Shelley invented the sci-fi genre when she wrote Frankenstein in her late teens. She had Pluto in Aquarius on her midheaven, and her book still serves as a warning today for themes of social isolation, as well as asking who was the real monster. Hint, it was the scientist. So the shadow side of Pluto in Aquarius is the lack of compassion and humanity. Again, Pluto is in harmony with Neptune, Saturn, and Uranus early on, so I'm hoping they all play nicely without ushering in social change through cataclysm. Neptune and Saturn are conjunct at 0 Aries very soon. They set off the gun show with a reality versus fantasy check. Saturn may offer restraint and limitation to an ideal of independence and agency, to a Neptunian ideal, fantasy, or delusion. Battle lines may be further drawn over gender and identity, perhaps. What we're looking at is some kind of like split us against them. So to a Neptunian ideal, it could be manifest as religious doctrine informing law, which we're already seeing diminish women's right, and a pullback on defining our identities. On a positive, we may find the perfect balance of expressing our spirituality and collective independence of personhood in a concrete and constructive way. In conclusion, the word count isn't enough to explore the long list of potentials for where we're headed and how we may express the mix of archetypes coming up. So I'll remind you, dear reader, that as you step forward into this brave, new, fast-paced world, step with intention. Take the lead with courage. Each of us has a personal power we can use to envision the world we live in, the energy we send out, the decisions we make, and the response we choose. What you share, repost, bring up in conversation, and expose your psyche to all matter. Nurture your body, mind, and spirit, and those around you with positivity, because it only takes one spark to ignite a fire.